the Iranian regime have warned the Houthis not to attack American vessels because they're afraid of Donald Trump. Like this, the Trump effect is happening without even him saying anything. They're just totally afraid of being caught up in a skirmish with America under Trump. It's really great to have strong leadership back in the White House. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Luke Reacts. Been out under the weather for a few weeks now, so it's good to be back. Man, what a time we are living in. This new president of ours, President Donald J. Trump, is killing it. Man, like he signed like 100 executive orders his first day. Now, I'm going to do a episode here on the executive orders. Before that, please like and subscribe to our channel here. We crossed the 20,000 subscribers point this week, which makes me so happy. So make it, be sure to add your name to it so that you can get regularly updated on all the cool stuff we're doing over here at the Philos Project channel. So Donald Trump and the executive orders. So I was, if anybody had asked me before, Trump came into office, even, before he won, I was telling people Trump needs to throw out just a ton of executive orders day one, just do hundreds. Why? Because the fury of executive orders would make it really hard for the other side to figure out which battles to fight because they can't fight them all. So they have to be strategic on which ones they fight because there's only so much bandwidth in the news to handle the pushback and to kind of, create the kind of, groundswell of support you need for some lawfare projects. But what I want to focus on today is the executive orders that have anything to do with Israel and the Middle East. All right. So another executive order that Trump has signed is the release of all the weapons and bombs that Israel had bought and paid for that were sold to them. And the fact that the Biden administration, on one hand, would say, "Oh, we're not slowing down our shipments of bombs and guns and stuff to Israel," and then Israel will be like, "Yeah, you are," and no, you're not. And so it was this back and forth. The Biden administration would say they wouldn't. Israel saying they would. It was pretty obviously that the Biden administration was withholding these weapons. Basically, Trump released all of the weapons that Israel has bought. There was a bunch of particularly 2,000-pound bombs, not just the bombs, but more importantly, one of the things that the Biden administration was withholding was actually the guidance systems that are attached to those bombs, because the guidance systems would make those bombs from being dumb bombs to being smart bombs. And obviously, we want more smart bombs than dumb bombs, because dumb bombs means they're just going to drop it, hope it hits the target. But when you have a smart bomb, it hits the target. That's the way the smart bombs work, right? And so one of the things that was withheld was the little thing that goes on the front of the bomb that would guide it to its target. And it was important that we released the bombs and weapons that Israel purchased from us. All right. Sanctions against the International Criminal Court, right? So in his last administration, Trump had put sanctions on the ICC, and he had done this because the ICC was going after Americans, right? And, any American that was involved in Afghanistan or any other place where there was conflict, there was a lot of they were being targeted by the International Criminal Court, because the way the International Criminal Court is that basically anybody who's a member of it can bring accusations against another party. And most recently, the ICC has put out an arrest warrant for Bibi Netanyahu and several of the other cabinet members. And
this has caused a lot of problems. Now, Bibi Netanyahu cannot travel to most of the countries of Europe because most of the countries of Europe are members of the ICC, and they're doing this because they accuse Bibi Netanyahu of war crimes, uh, of starvation and genocide against the people of Gaza. Now, if you have seen any of the pictures in the last week of Gazans who are celebrating the ceasefire and celebrating the when the hostages are going to be released, they parade them, put up this big stage, and there's Hamas fighters and with new guns and they cleaned the Jeeps and they washed the clothes and they took off their civilian clothes and put on uniforms and are now pretending to be actual soldiers instead of civilians, right? Like that's the kind of thing. When the ICC was going after Israel, they were like accusing Israel of targeting civilians. Well, these Hamas fighters were wearing civilian clothes, and it wasn't just limited to uh, men over the age of 18 who are shooting at Israeli soldiers, women, and even young boys as 12, 13, 14-year-olds would run up and target Israeli tanks and Israeli positions, etc. And so obviously there was a lot of death and destruction. That's what you can see also in the pictures. But the ICC has it in for Israel, as do most international institutions, because most international institutions are demonic, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not a big fan of most international institutions. Actually, I can't think of any that I'm a fan of. Comes to mind. So ICC now sanctioned once again. That's great. Okay. Now, one of the ones that I'm most excited about is the withholding of funds from what's called UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency. Now, UNRWA was established to basically provide for Palestinian refugees who were who fled in 1948 from Israeli territories, or also 1967. Now, every refugee in the world. Now, I've worked in refugee camps in Thailand. I've worked in refugee camps in Jordan and in Iraq and all over the world. I've worked at refugee camps. Now, all those people at every other refugee camp in the world, they're handled by an agency called UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees. Palestinians are get special treatment. They have their own little special thing, which not only perpetuates the conflict, because it perpetuates the refugee status generationally. So if your parents were refugees, you're a refugee. If your grandparents were refugees, you're a refugee, according to UNRWA. Okay, that status is not the same. If you were most people don't realize that Bhutan ethnically cleansed a bunch of people out of Bhutan back in the 90s, actually early 2000s. And if you could not prove your Bhutanese lineage back 7 generations, or if you had converted to Christianity or any other religion, you were kicked out of Bhutan. Okay. Bhutan is a small Buddhist kingdom that borders India and I think it borders China too. But Bhutan, it was basically ethnically cleansed a bunch of people. I mean, 7 generations is a long time. I'm not sure that my family has been in America 7 generations, but that's what the Bhutanese required. And that the Bhutanese refugee camp that I worked in Thailand is no longer there. Why? Because it was emptied. And it was emptied because either people were repatriated back to Bhutan, most not, or those Bhutanese who were in the refugee camp were kind of spread around the world, to places that receive refugees, like the United States, Canada, a bunch of countries of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc. Okay, so that is what happens to refugees all over the world, millions and millions of them, except for the Palestinian refugees. They get special treatment, perpetuated years and years and years. I mean, the number of people who are still alive from 1948 who were refugees in 1948 is a very small number. Okay, 1967 there's a bunch more, but UNRWA is responsible for education and providing food and medical care and all sorts of stuff for Palestinian refugees. I mean, like a lot of the groups we take to Israel will go to one of the refugee camps in, outside of Bethlehem or outside of Ramallah or something like that. Why are there refugee camps within the Palestinian territories? Because of this perpetuation of the refugee status. And why is it important that the Arabs perpetuate the refugee status? So it keeps the grievance going a long, long time. Here's one of the things that Arabs or Muslims like to do. They like to perpetuate the injustice, remind people of the injustices against them. One example, so in the Balkans, I was in the Balkans in 2009, all the countries of the Balkans, right? And in Sarajevo, there were still a lot of buildings that had the remnants of the war in Sarajevo, the Bosnian Serbian War. Okay, and there was a lot of buildings had bullet holes still. Like this war ended in '96, so we're talking what 13 years later, and they still haven't filled in the bullet holes on the sides of buildings. Why? Because they want to perpetuate this idea of this. We were attacked and we were harmed, and it kind of keeps that fervor going. Okay, Dubrovnik, which is in Croatia, also was attacked by Serbia. Most of Dubrovnik's a beautiful, beautiful city, and most of the roofs in Dubrovnik are that terracotta tile, that reddish tile, right? If you had visited Dubrovnik in like '96, a third of the buildings in Dubrovnik would have been missing parts of their roofs because of the war. When I went in 2009, you couldn't tell there was ever a war. Why? Because Croatia is a Catholic country. They fill in the holes. Like even in Israel, like the places where the October 7th happened. There's a memorial at the police station, but the buildings are nearby that would have there was been you can tell they had been where the bullet holes had been filled in. There's fresh paint. Like it's a weird thing. I don't but it's that perpetuation of the reminder of the supposed injustice that keeps these kinds of things going for a long time. And it's one of the reasons why I think UNRWA being unfunded by the United States, we're the largest donor to UNRWA, and Congress last year passed a law that U.S. cannot fund UNRWA, and here is this executive order confirming that. Okay, and that's really important because UNRWA needs to go. UNRWA, like either the Palestinians need to be treated like every other refugee in the world, or the services that are provided for Palestinian refugees need to be taken up by other agencies. But this like perpetuation and given this special status, there was a bunch of Hamas fighters in UNRWA in Gaza, tons of them. I have a friend who grew up in an UNRWA school in Gaza. Most of his teachers were Hamas, and he describes how they would make the form of the cross in front of him and spit on him and stuff like that in school because he wouldn't convert. And they accused him of blasphemy, and so he had to run. He had to flee school, and it was on the run for a while because he was accused of blasphemy at his UNRWA school. UNRWA had Hezbollah fighters in its leadership in Lebanon. Okay, like this is the kind of thing that UNRWA was involved with. It's no surprise because UNRWA has been perpetuating this grievance against Israel now since 1948, and that's a long time to perpetuate a grievance. You create this nasty, nasty, uh, vengeance idea. I mean, one of the girls that was released from captivity in Gaza this last week said to her dad when she was released, "Dad, there's 2 million terrorists in Gaza." She said she was guarded. She was 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds that were guarding her were cursing the Jews the entire time she was there. Right? That's the legacy of UNRWA, and the fact that my hope, my great prayer, is that UNRWA is done away with. This is one step in that process, and I hope it continues. I hope UNRWA is gone. I'm not a huge fan of the UN either, but you got to pick your battles early on here. All right, couple more. The reversal of sanctions on Israel settlers. Now, this is probably one of the ones that was probably not known by people who are kind of outside the normal conversation on Israel, but under the Biden administration, there was a group called Dawn, DAWN, and Dawn had basically compiled a list of what they believed to be settlers behaving badly, and this list was given to the administration, and the administration decided to put sanctions on these Israeli settlers. Now, these Israeli settlers were typically farmers in Judea and Samaria. They were involved in kind of what's called the mountaintop settler or the hilltop settler movement. If there's a empty hilltop in Judea, they would go set up some campers and water tanks and basically say, "Hey guys, we're gonna live in the ancient homeland of the Jewish people in Israel." And some of these guys were sanctioned, and what happened is the sanctions were so broad that it led to a chilling effect of people who were giving to any of the settler movements, right? Like there were some that were, there's ones that are clearly living, settlers who are living on land that was purchased by Israel by the Jewish National Fund in the 20s. And that land they have the deed to it. They've been working the land ever since. Obviously between 48 and 1967, they had no access to it. But there's these pieces of land that were bought and paid for, and they have the deeds. They were bought from the Ottoman Turks or whoever, and they have the deed to it. Now, so there are settlers living on that land who are trying to do basically just hold the land. Now, those settlers also got caught up in this because of that chilling effect on all the settlers. And the problem is that there was the sanctions were so broad that normal banks, people who give towards various causes, were afraid of falling onto this sanction because it would mean that their bank accounts would be shut down and that kind of thing. Now, a friend of mine out of Texas filed a lawsuit against this, and it was working its way through the courts. It was pretty early on in the stages, but fortunately, one of the first executive orders under Donald Trump was the reversal of the Israeli settler sanctions. Now, this is really great news. I'm a firm believer in Israel and Jews living in their ancient homeland, Judea and Samaria. I'm done with the two-state. There's never going to be a Palestinian state in what is called the West Bank. And really, what anybody who's being thoughtful about this needs needs to really what we're ultimately after is safety and security for everyone who is living in the land of Israel. That's what we're after. Whether they're Jews or Arabs or Christians or Druze or Bedouins or, Circassians, or like there's a bunch of different kinds of people living in that land. And everybody needs to be able to live in safety and security, whether they're Jews or Arabs. And that's the goal, right? And it's not going to, unfortunately, it's not going to come through a two-state, because what we saw with Gaza was like a microcosm of what would be a Palestinian state, and Israel can't let that happen. And so, and all these Jews who are moving back to the land from the north to south, east, and the west, back to the land that was promised to them as the everlasting covenant. People coming from Denmark and France and England and the United States and all over the world back to that land. They're not all going back to where they're going to live in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv's like huge. There's not enough land in the, kind of normal Israel. They got to have somewhere to go. And going and living in their ancient homeland is important. And it's important to me. So I'm very pleased with the revocation of the sanctions against these settlers, right? So obviously there's settlers behaving badly, and I don't support any of that. Anytime, somebody wantonly burns down an Arab olive tree, I'm against that. That's not at all what I'm supporting. What I'm supporting is Jews and Arabs living side by side in the land. That's what I support. And living in safety and security. Also that. All right, there was a executive order about combating anti-Semitism and Israeli boycotts. One of the things that Trump had done in his first term was to recognize Judaism as both a religion and a ethnic identity. And so by doing so, it gave it additional protection under the law. And Biden did away with that. When Biden came into office, it did away with that recognition through an executive order. This time, Trump comes back and reinstates that. What that means is that, anti-Semitism on college campuses, things in, Title IX type stuff that is happening in college campuses where Jews are discriminated against, both either religiously or ethnically. Both of those now fall under the purview of discrimination and can be dealt with accordingly, which I think is really, really great. And I think it will bolster some of the lawsuits and I would say proper critiques of some of the particularly elite institutions in the United States that were just so rabidly anti-Semitic, particularly from October 7th in the school year last year. It's less now. There's been a good crackdown on some of that stuff, but it's still very, very problematic. At Columbia last week, there was a course on the history of Israel, and a bunch of Columbia students marched in wearing masks, passed out anti-Semitic literature, etc. And it's really I like that this gives additional weapons, basically, to the Jews to use against these institutions that have treated them so poorly. All right, finally, the last one. This is number 6. Is the deportation of foreign nationals that have been supporting terrorism. Now, this is one of the ones that I've been pushing for more than a year now, was that you have all these people who are here on student visas or work visas that are supporting Hamas, meaning they're wearing Hamas headbands, they're celebrating the October 7th, they're celebrating Hamas, they're celebrating Hezbollah or the Houthis or any of these people. And they, that is actually in violation of their visas, because in the visas itself, in the requirements to get a visa into the United States, you agree that you will not support terrorists or anti-American organizations, provide material support for them. And so you have these examples of students who are here on student visas who are promoting Hamas or Hezbollah, organizations that are recognized by the United States as terrorist organizations, and they could lose their either student visa status or their work permit status. And if that's the case, the reason I'm so supportive of this, because it will have a real chilling effect. I suspect there's a lot of students here on student visas who are participating in these anti-Israel marches and the pro-Hamas marches or whatever. And they're here like studying biology or I don't know, accounting or who knows what. And their mom and dad back home is like they're not, they're just sending their kid off to study in America. That's, and they the people who are coming to the United States to study at these schools, they don't get in-state tuition. They're paying full price for their education, full tuition, which means they're really expensive. And I guarantee the mom and dad who have been saving up for years to put their kids through a school in the United States, if there was a threat that their student, their kid could lose his student visa for participating in pro-Hamas marches, I guarantee moms and dad's going to call that kid and say like, hey, don't join that stuff. We sent you to study accounting, not to be in some kind of marches or whatever. Sure, we support, all the stuffs and whatever, but don't do that. Okay. It will have a real chilling effect, which is a good thing. Same with all these professors who are promoting anti-American ideologies and terrorists. I mean, again, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis are all recognized by the United States as terrorist organization. All right. One final look, this was actually came a little bit later than in the beginning of the week, was redesignation of the Houthis as a terrorist organization. The Houthis have been basically attacking ships in the Red Sea. And I think a lot of people are unaware of how much of an impact that has had on the economy. So the ships that would previously have gone through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal into Europe, those ships are now traveling around the Horn of Africa, and it's a much longer voyage, actually much longer. Additionally, because it's longer, it adds somewhere between 5 to 10% to goods coming to or from the United States and Europe. Okay, so there is a direct financial cost to the Houthis blocking and attacking the ships in the Red Sea. Now, one of the things that has happened, and this is totally kind of incidental, is that the Iranian regime have warned the Houthis not to attack American vessels because they're afraid of Donald Trump. So like this, the Trump effect is happening without even him saying anything. They're just totally afraid of being caught up in a skirmish with America under Trump. It's really great to have strong leadership back in the White House. The weak need America last stuff of the last administration is done, and it's a really great thing. All right, so amazing first week. I look forward to it continuing. I mean, maybe it's like it's morning in America, feels that way, but for the time being, I'm very happy with the direction things are going. So once again, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to our channel, and if you feel generous, how about give a donation to the Philos Project as well, because we are supported by people like you. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.